afternoon, all, and welcome to another edition of the Sal Greco Show. And I'm your host, Sal Greco. Thank you for tuning in. I hope everybody had a good weekend. Obviously, there's a lot that's been going on in the news yet again between New York City, the mayor's race. We had the Mets and Yankees this weekend. I also went to Lone Depot Park. I watched the Marlins win, who've actually been one of the hottest teams in baseball, if you could believe it. But thank you for tuning in. We'll get into all of that. If you can, please hit that like, share, subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that Rumble and like button on Rumble if you can. And if you're watching us on X streaming live right now, please hit that repost button and share this out to all your friends and some in that low information circle of people you know, because they truly need to be informed right about now. But to start off, obviously, you all know, I'm sure you've heard that there's a mega bombshell lawsuit that effectively, I believe, ends Eric Adams once and for all. And that's that 4 NYPD chiefs say they were forced out after exposing misconduct tied to Mayor Eric Adams' allies' lawsuits. And this is essentially things that you've heard not only on this show, but on this network. I believe John McCarry, who broke this, by the way, shout out to John. He was the first one that mentioned anything online. It was on X, and then everyone else piggybacked off of John. He actually, I believe, even put the photograph of the lawsuit. But John, Eric, Marlon, myself, even Ron and Rob, who came on a little bit later on, we have highlighted the corruption here. We don't just highlight it. We bring you evidence. We bring you facts. I've brought you documents. I brought you all these different things. And yet you have people out there that say Eric Adams should be the savior. Yet Eric Adams is the linchpin in all of this. So, and here, this is an AMNY article, I believe. This is from Serena Townsend, who I can tell you will be on the show on Thursday to discuss all of this, all the lawsuits, all the information. There's a lot of claims there. She says, my clients were amongst the highest ranked members of NYPD, each of whom gave between 30 and 40 unblemished years to our great city, only to be pushed out by a mayor who chose nepotism and retaliation over safety and merit, Townsend said. So I'm actually going to read this New York Daily News article, so forgive me. I'll take a little breaks in between because I want to break this down. So the Daily News article, by the way, is written by Chris Sommerfeld and Graham Raymond, the Batman and Robin of the beat in New York City, as I like to say. So it starts off saying 4 high-ranking former NYPD chiefs are suing Mayor Adams, claiming they were forced to retire from the department after complaining that his unqualified friends were being placed in prestigious police positions, sometimes after allegedly bribing their way into the jobs. The lawsuits filed late Monday also named former police commissioner Edward Caban and former NYPD chief of department Jeffrey Madry as defendants, alleging they participated in a conspiracy with the mayor to punish the 4 senior ex-cops. 2 of the suits also named ex-deputy mayor for public safety Phil Banks and current NYPD chief of department John Schell as defendants, alleging they also participated in the scheme. Banks and Caban resigned last year after their homes were searched and phones seized in federal corruption investigations separate from the probe that resulted in the mayor's September 2024 bribery and campaign finance fraud indictment. They have not been charged with any wrongdoing. Geez, I wonder why. Oh, that's right. Trump's DOJ paused everything. Remember that one as we go along. Madry stepped down in December in the wake of also coming under federal investigation over allegations he forced a subordinate to perform sex acts on him in exchange for overtime pay. The 4 ex-chiefs, James Essig, Matthew Pontillo, Joseph Veneziano, and Christopher McCormack, all retired in the second half of 2023 as part of a department shakeup. In their lawsuits, the 4 ex-chiefs alleged they were forced to resign after they raised concerns about an allegedly systematic problem within the department whereby allies of Adams were being put into elite NYPD units despite scant experience. I could give you one example. Kaz Daughtry should never have been where he was, but he was, as Eric Din likes to say, promoted by rocket fuel. The overarching theme is whistleblower retaliation, said Serena Townsend, an attorney representing all 4 chiefs. These are people who were in the department for 30 to 40 years who knew what was right and wrong. What Adams and his group wanted to do was cut corners, do things against policy, do things that were unconstitutional. Essig, the highest-ranking ex-cop of the quartet who served as the NYPD's chief of detectives, alleges in his suit that the practice first started around January 2023 when he noticed that Madry, a longtime friend to Adams, was trying to get friends placed into senior units within the department's criminal task force division. Many of the Madry pals getting the top jobs were unqualified and or incompetent, according to Essig's suit. I think Eric Dim has mentioned this, I don't know how many times, calling these people that were being promoted incompetent, unqualified. So this is a theme you've heard over and over again here. Essig allegedly went to Caban at the time, the NYPD's first deputy commissioner, to complain. We can't be doing this, Essig told Caban, according to the suit. But according to the suit, Caban rejected his complaint and shot back. Do you have a problem with this? Essig alleged Caban ignored the complaint because he was engaged in a similar practice, having hand-picked friends and cronies for discretionary promotions that bypassed official procedures. In a bombshell claim, Essig alleges, citing information and belief, that Caban engaged in that practice because he was selling promotions to cops for up to $15,000 a pop. Essig's suit, also citing information and belief, says Caban is currently under federal investigation for selling discretionary promotions. I want to point out, it was right here on the Finest Unfiltered where you first began to hear about this corruption scandal, which also involved the nightclub extortion racket part of it, but that there was quote-unquote envelopes being dropped off at locations like Consofrito in the Bronx, which is run by a mob associate and close friend of the Caban family and Eddie Caban's brother, Richard Caban. So, and it involved the Hispanic Society, allegedly, and the president of that society was involved, and there's all kinds of mishigas there. And there were people that were coming forward that said they had paid for promotions, allegedly, and they're still POs or they're not, they're third-grade detectives. Nothing's happening with their promotions. So there is some teeth to this. It's just Trump's DOJ paused all this investigations because for whatever reason, they want to be in bed with Eric Adams. And this is now the backlash of being in bed with Eric Adams. So this article continues. Spokespeople for Adams and NYPD didn't immediately return requests for comment. Lawyers for Caban, Madry, and Banks didn't immediately return requests for comment either. According to the lawsuits, Caban, Madry, Banks, and Shell threatened all four chiefs with steep demotions after they raised their complaints. They allege that this is wrong. They allege that left them with no other choice but to retire. The suits allege that Caban and the others acted with the express authority of Mayor Adams in doling out all the punishment. So that is as groundbreaking as it gets, folks. You've heard on this show, you've heard on the Finest Unfiltered Network over and over again, this corruption, where it stemmed from, how it started. It doesn't even mention Tim Pearson, but clearly this circle, this network, what we like to call the Crumbs crew and the Consofrito crew, they were running the city. Eric Adams, the way this looks, Eric Adams, who's the top guy, we'll consider him the head, the boss of this operation, and his little cronies on the side will then deviate things through the cronies to the NYPD. For whatever reason, Eric Adams appears that he is a frustrated police commissioner, not a mayor. He was running the police department for a very, very long time. I think he still is, because clearly there's a lot of things going on still, and yet there's no answers. There's a lot of puff pieces for soccer mom Jessica Tisch, who claims she's the police commissioner, and Eric Adams now. In fact, it's the New York Post that even, I believe, broke this story first, or wrote about it first, and the New York Post is doing nothing but cheerleading for Eric Adams, which essentially, this should end any talk of Eric Adams getting reelected, running for office. He's a complete disgrace. He's been in disgrace, and I'm not here to pat myself on the back or pat John and Eric and Marlon and Rob and Ron, but we were all the time giving you fact-based analysis and facts and evidence to show that this tale that started all the way, the beginning of this tale that started all the way when Eric Adams won and was running for office, had corruption all throughout it, all the way till now. And I like to point out that if Curtis Sliwa was the mayor and had won in 2021, or if Curtis Sliwa was the mayor right now, absolutely none of this would happen. Why is John Schell even a chief of this guy? He cost the city when he killed someone, okay? And remember, I was the one that pointed out that trial he had, that grand jury, there's no minutes. The minutes of it is missing. And the head of at the time, the district attorney's office that was in charge of investigating that ended up working for Eric Adams and was fired for sexual harassment. There's no record of grand jury minutes. So that in itself should be a whole nother thing that gets questioned. John Schell at that time in 2008, this investigation comes down. Yet John Schell, the civil trial happens and the city pays out $2.5 million for a wrongful death. Yet this grand jury, so you're saying the grand jury, he claims he was cleared. There's no record of this. The grand jury minutes are missing. You go to Brooklyn, the Brooklyn DA's office and go look for it for yourselves if you don't believe me. That is missing. We also had another bombshell revelation recently that John Schell is a tax cheat. This guy falsified records, said he was someone else. If that was you or I, not only would we be charged, but we would most definitely lose our jobs. But somehow he got kept into the police department. He just kept moving up the ranks. See, right here, Chief of Department John Schell used false identity in bid to avoid income tax. NYPD records show. And you can't see this unless you sue. So they had to sue him directly and got access to this record. So you won't see this on the 50A. You won't see this anywhere, right, with John Schell. We move on to Jeffrey Madry, who is, he has his own scandal. We've had Eric Sanders on. We broke this. I broke so many first with that and explained how this all went down. There's still some things that are not out there publicly and are not known yet, that he was not only trading favors for sex, he was basically a bully. Basically, he was forcing people, which is mentioned here in the Veneziano part, that there was overtime that he was pushing out, telling his subordinates that they have to give to certain people, okay? Epstein, the lieutenant at the time in office, he was basically coercing her to do all kinds of things and have her under his thumb. There's other people in that office as well. There's more to come out with that. There's people that he was browbeating, and he's basically operating like a don in himself. That's Jeffrey Madry. Then we have Eddie Caban, who, the guy went to Qatar. He was like I never saw a police commissioner that was out and about more than this guy. This guy was partying to the break of dawn more than he was showing up to work. We could go back. I'm sure you all have Con Sofrito engraved in your heads now. That's Caban, that self-admitted criminal mob associate Jimmy Rodriguez, and entire New York City Police Department upper brass, which is, Veneziano. Here's a connection. Veneziano, who was the assistant chief of internal affairs, was pushed out for Miguel Iglesias, another Con Sofrito guy who is Eddie Caban's stooge. And here, this was part of that Qatari thing that nobody wants to bring up anymore. Back when Eddie Caban went there, the Qatari government paid for the Big Apple's top cop to visit the Middle East, part of a handful of international jaunts kept quiet by Mayor Eric Adams' administration. Police Commissioner Edward Caban jet-setted from New York City a half dozen times last year on the dime of foreign governments or pro-policing groups, according to his annual financial report, which for the first time revealed how some of those trips were funded. Look, that in itself is a red flag. People overlooked that. People were overlooking everything. Everything. Okay. Then we had Phil Banks, an unindicted co-conspirator who is mentioned over and over and over again in numerous cases. He's been, some almost like this mob figure hanging around in the background of the New York City Police Department for at least, I'd say, over 10 years now, since when he was the chief of the department himself. This guy unethically, he's unethically equipped to be doing the job he's doing. And then underneath him, you had Tim Pearson, who was, I guess, the deputy to the deputy of public safety at that time. But he shouldn't have been there either in that role. And he is this shady, gloomy figure as well, because you learn through all these other lawsuits, like the Tim Pearson sexual harassment lawsuits, how this works, because somehow Tim Pearson had a say over internal affairs. He definitely, as you learn, because as our good friend Serena Townsend, who's actually bringing these lawsuits forward and was a commissioner at the Department of Corrections, could tell you, Tim Pearson somehow was shadowy running the corrections department in NYPD. I don't get it, but all of this has been in your face. So to hear now that Eric Adams is the savior while ignoring all of this, it's just, are you low information or what? Like that's the best way to describe this, because you're ignoring all facts, all evidence, and it proves that no matter what you think of the other three candidates, this guy is unqualified and unfit to be in office. And I told you that he is basically auditioning to be in Trump's cabinet, which at this point, there's only, I don't know, you could consider a few people there that actually are doing a good job, because there's an entire fiasco with his cabinet and how he's handling things. And I also want to touch up a little bit on the mayor's race here, because this is going to directly affect this. And tune in on Thursday. I'm going to have Serena Townsend on to really get into these lawsuits and all the claims and all the mishigas going on with this. But the mayor's race showed some polls recently, and you saw that it had Mamdani at 35% and Cuomo 29%, Sliwa at 16%, and Eric at 12 or 14%. And it also showed the most important part, favorabilities. Mamdani was at a +9. Cuomo was at a -5. Sliwa was at a -9. And Eric Adams was at a -28. Like I told everyone, he has a favorability in New York City of 28%. This today is not going to help him at all. In fact, people should abandon ship ASAP, because now this case is going to be in the New York State Court. So paging Alvin Bragg, maybe you need to jump in since they pause all these investigations in the federal court. And here, it says right there what the poll was at. Oh, and Jim Walden at 1%. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting Jim Walden's in it, because the guy unfortunately gets like no coverage. They barely mention his name. It's really sad because they're too busy supporting Eric Adams apparently. But that poll though oversampled Democrats. Even though it's a city of 7-1 Democrat to Republican, you still have to be fair and you have to poll independents and Republicans. And they didn't do that there. So the true polls, once again, would really show Eric Adams, I believe, in the neighborhood of 3 to 4% of that total vote, while everyone else is at the 30%. Anywhere between 25 and 35 is where the other three candidates are, which is Curtis, Mamdani, and Cuomo. Remember, they're vying for the three candidates are vying for the majority of one vote, which is Democrat. And then the other candidate has the Republican vote. And you might have people crisscross over, but then right in the middle, other people that always decide elections, which are independents. So these polls, I told you, I said it on the Finance Unfiltered on Friday, are going to be suppression polls. The internal polls are what matters. And if that's not being said here, again, I'm telling you, the real polls are Cuomo, Mamdani, and Curtis. If you took a temperature right now, are all in the 25 to 35% range. And that always varies. That's going to vary over time. Eric is nowhere near that. And really, he's a disgrace and should just get out of the race, go to D.C., go party with Emo Bove, because you heard Trump the other day, who I don't know what the hell he was thinking, saying, I did him a favor or whatever he said. He went at the press conference when he said to basically he soft endorsed Eric Adams and said he's a nice guy and I did something for him or something to that degree. That's a quid pro quo. That will come back around to bite him. And why? Because of the next subject we're going to talk about, because it all intercedes with each other. That this whole Jeffrey Epstein thing from yesterday. Now, if you remember, just to give some context here, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein's finally indicted. This was under Trump's original DOJ for child sex trafficking, all this crazy stuff that for years there's been rumors that he was involved with. He was charged in Florida at the time. I believe Pam Bondi was the Attorney General of Florida, who's now the Attorney General of the United States. And there was a guy named Acosta who ended up being the prosecutor in Palm Beach, and Acosta ends up later on working in Trump's administration, okay? And they did ask him about this, and he had some things to say about it, which were very eyebrow-raising, Mr. Acosta. But I'm going to show you Deputy Dan. Now, Deputy Dan here, Dan Bongino, Mr. Podcaster, now turned government official, who claims everyone, you hear that this guy was an NYPD cop. He was there for a cup of coffee. I don't know what kind of police work this guy really knows, but Dan Bongino here used to go on his show and basically made a living on commenting about things. He is now the deputy director of the FBI. And by default, he has this case. He had this case, this Jeffrey Epstein case, the files, all this stuff, because all people want to see is that client list and they just want accountability. So let's just play what Deputy Dan had to say. Not even a couple of years ago when he was the podcaster.
Huge story. Again, not a lot of people are talking about. There is a little current of information I'm getting that the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi may be finally releasing a lot of information on this Jeffrey Epstein case, which is a huge deal. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I'm hoping it does. I've been covering it for a long time. The Jeffrey Epstein case, you do not know all the details of this thing, I promise. There are a lot of really obviously powerful people. This part you know, but the specific names we may not, including, I believe, the Clintons, based on information I discussed yesterday, who are knee-deep in involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, and no one can figure out what the level of entanglement is. Jeffrey Epstein met with Obama's fixer, his lawyer, Catherine Rumler, who was always the one in the middle of these Obama scandals, and we can't figure out what they're hiding. Here's Marsha Blackburn, who has been all over this. She's a senator from Tennessee, Republican, obviously. And she's like, hey, man, is it time now? It's time to start overturning that rock and seeing what's underneath it. Check this out.
I've repeatedly requested a subpoena for the complete unredacted Epstein flight logs from the FBI. I've also pushed for the release of Ghislaine Maxwell's unredacted little black book of contacts and addresses. The American people have the right to know who flew on his planes, who witnessed the crimes, and who potentially participated in his global sex trafficking ring. Yet time and again, in the last Congress, Democrat leadership and then FBI Director Wray stonewalled my request. But now, with Republican control of Congress and President Trump back in the Oval Office, we're going to see some real change on this issue. Just last week, the president's excellent pick for FBI Director Kash Patel vowed to work with me in releasing the Epstein records and breaking apart the trafficking rings that harm countless women and children across our country. To be clear, this is not a celebrity issue. This is about ending modern day slavery and finding out who is participating in these sex trafficking rings.
Did you hear the key part of that? the Ghislaine Maxwell Black Book. What?
Yeah, I don't know what happened at that second part there, but you heard that part, right? So here he is making a living. I could keep playing this.
Names are in there, man. You understand how many powerful people probably want this thing to desperately go away? How many people were interconnected with this Epstein sex ring operation? I heard from a reporter once that there are tapes. A very well-respected reporter, many of you know, that there are a lot of tapes out there of a lot of people. I'm not ever going to let this story go because of what I heard from a source about Bill Clinton on a plane with Jeffrey Epstein. I talked about it yesterday. You can go check it out. I'm not letting it go ever. Ever.
He's not letting it go, folks. He's saying he has all this inside knowledge. There's tapes, there's video. But now let's play what Deputy Dan was saying first, just not even 2 years ago, and now as the Deputy Director of the FBI.
Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. Catherine Rumler, we need to keep the heat on this case, folks. There are a lot of people who are knee deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. Outside of a few entrepreneurial media outlets saying, hey, this is a big deal.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein.
This guy made a living off of this. Many of you, kind of like you're doing right now, Eric Adams is the savior. You literally gave this guy his income. And when the guy got in office, when he has the right to, I'm going to see the file, I'm going to do this and that. Oh, he killed himself. Nothing to see here. It's over. He made a living off of this. This is why podcasters should not be in government, especially those who claim like there's something that they never were, like a cop. Okay, so that in itself is disgraceful. And John McCarthy's covered that. But this gets even crazier. And I see the comments here. Okay, now there's a video I want to show you, Pam Bondi, because this is what Pam Bondi said when they asked her about this.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead. Are you?
Yeah, I disagree with the president there. The problem is that your administration, everyone that was lobbying to get you in office on air and also said that they want to get to the bottom of this, screamed that they wanted justice. So this had just happened a few minutes ago. And, let's just forget about it. And I understand there is a tragedy. I feel very sorry for what's going on in Texas. That's a natural disaster. And the president's going to tour over there and see what he could do and send aid and National Guard and all of that. But the reason people are asking is because the MAGA base was promised that there was going to be accountability when it came to Jeffrey Epstein, who's a polarizing figure. And listen, I'm not a big guy on this either myself because he already had been dead for 6 years. So I don't see what the fascination is with him other than many other parts of this are connected because Jeffrey Epstein was connected to Ghislaine Maxwell, who's serving a 20-year sentence. And we don't even know all the full details of her case. She's a co-conspirator to what? Who's the other co-conspirators? And he did the same thing recently with who? P. Diddy. And what happened with the P. Diddy case? Well, if Email Bove doesn't come down on Eric Adams' case and corruptly gets rid of that case, which is clearly a quid pro quo at this point. I mean, there's not going to be any questions about this by the time the Trump administration is done in 2029 to hear about what really happened there. But if Email Bove doesn't get rid of the 7 prosecutors, basically they resigned, be in disgrace. They were disgraced by what they wanted them to do. One of those prosecutors is the prosecutor from the P. Diddy case. Because he was no longer there, Comey, the former FBI director's daughter, ended up with that case. And this is a fact that people are overlooking. So, and I guess the final piece I want to show is a guest of mine I've had on, Kyle Seraphin, who was an FBI agent, retired, and he went on Alex Jones' show yesterday, and he had this to say. He knows a lot about both Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. He knows how the FBI works. He was a whistleblower, folks. So let's just play this for everyone.
I think Bongino's gone by the end of the year. I think that was true before this.
Well, you think other things too.
I think that Patel doesn't make it past midterms if they decide to switch over. But I also see that Patel is actually kind of useful. He's actually kind of fitting into the role of FBI director, which is a guy that flies around on a jet and defends the FBI vigorously, doesn't do anything in particular that we're hoping he does, and takes credit for things the FBI always does, and gets them a new building. By the way, they're moving to the Reagan building. I don't know if people saw that. You guys probably covered this the other day. That's not what we said. The whole idea was to decentralize it out of D.C.
Not get a bigger building.
Not to go move into a bigger building down the street that puts you in the exact same problem. The reason that D.C. is problematic to have the FBI, the DOJ, and Washington field office in the same area is because FBI senior officials they need a certain amount of time in the field as a manager. Then they need a certain amount of time at headquarters as a program manager. Then they need some time back as a more senior manager. Then they need a more senior program. And they bounce back and forth. They don't even have to move, Alex. They can live in the outside of D.C. They live in Alexandria. A lot of them do.
Sure, and they can get them in the car.
And now, just to top this off, Representative Dan Goldman demands Attorney General Bondi release promised Jeffrey Epstein files, share whether President Trump has intervened in case to hide extensive relationship with Epstein. You see how things have been spun and changed now, just like that. I think class of 83, who's in the chat, he mentioned something here. He said Trump promised to revamp the corrupt FBI. All he did was replace Comey and Wray with Bongino and Patel. Same operation running. And can you argue with that right now? Like, I don't know what this was about. And you're seeing this. What could you say? And I think the reason people are losing it is because people were promised they were going to find out about who was on this list. If these files were truly destroyed, as in some people are saying that the files were destroyed under Christopher Wray, then why did Pam Bondi go on Fox News and state that the files were on her desk and she was reviewing them, and that another line of hers was that she couldn't release the videos and the tapes because there's a lot of, I guess you don't want to see that because it involves children. But still, she had these files, she had the names, and now don't talk about this, it's over. She can't say one thing and do another. And that's what's putting the spotlight on Trump. Trump appointed these people, folks. Don't blame other people. I know people blaming Pam Bondi. Who appointed them? That's who you really, if you question all this, who's appointing them and why? See, he gets it very wrong with the people like Bondi and Emo Bove, because Trump is not a Justice Department kind of guy, but he's doing excellent with Tulsi Gabbard and RFK and Scott Bessent and a few others in this administration. So I'm not killing the guy for everything, but you really need to look at the whole grand picture. And this Epstein thing, it was handled really bad, and he's losing a lot of supporters, but he already started losing them back when he did a quid pro quo with Eric Adams. So that's my whole take on that. You just saw a lot of hypocrisy, and you heard right there that Kyle Seraphin thinks that Deputy Dan and Pam Bondi would be gone. And maybe you don't know what Kash Patel's doing, but Kash Patel is kind of like a Christopher Wray. He's flying around the world in his airplane and nothing's getting done. He's flying across country. I mean, I thought we were getting, some accountability and transparency here, but seems like the same old happens in DC. So I was going to have my guest on there and I have his take on this because he's an anti-corruption crusader. So let me bring on James Jordan, friend of the show. I'm sure you just heard a lot there, James. There is a lot to take in. So I have you on because you're an anti-corruption crusader. So why don't we get a little bit of your background before you start giving your take on all of this stuff? Because I think it's like all connected.
Well, thanks very much for having me on, Sal. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Well, my take on it is that I'm from New York originally and grew up basically in the construction business because my father and grandfather were crane operators. But I was the first one in my family to go to college, so I worked demolition as my summer and Christmas jobs, but had no plans to go into the union because my father knew exactly what went on there, how dangerous it is to be on the job. And then once you're in the union, you're the union's boy. So you don't have the option of going outside that structure, which is the same thing as if you're with the NYPD, you're expected to report things up the chain of command, but that's exactly where your cover-ups are. So by having blue-collar experience as a younger guy and then going to college and working for Morgan Stanley in the World Trade Center and then on the New York Stock Exchange, I got to see the exact turnover where the federal attention went from investigating Wall Street and the mafia and the unions to all terrorism all the time. And then the mafia and Wall Street and the unions went right back to doing whatever they wanted. And then I stayed on the trading floor until the 07-08 market crash. And at that time, my son was an infant and I went broke on the trading floor and then went into the crane operators union as an adult. So guys had name recognition with me and they knew who I was as a kid. And they knew my father was in the union since the mid 60s. Now he's 82. He's down in Florida where all the smart people go.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had a good amount of insight from seeing it firsthand as a young guy. Like I was on my first construction site with my dad on a Saturday when I was 7 years old. And I was on a demolition job before I was 18. So it used to be that, you know, nepotism ran the unions, but there was so much organized crime and corruption in the unions that they kept getting nailed in RICOs and had federal judges put in charge of the membership and finances. So even though people knew who I was, I had to go back in the same bullpen with guys who just walked in off the street and take all these federal certifications. So that was nice that they might have recognized me, but it didn't help me actually getting in the union. And there was nothing my father could do because he just had a lot of seniority. He was never on the executive board or held elected office because if one of those guys gets jammed up, you're all in a RICO. So by seeing the way that the, you know, all these corporate skyscrapers are funded from being on Wall Street, and then seeing how the developers work and the construction companies and the city from the inside of these closed job sites, which the reason they're closed is A, they don't want anybody knowing what's going on. And B, for insurance purposes, they're what's called an attractive nuisance, meaning people want to walk in there and see what's going on, and then they get hurt and sue the developer. So there's a clear, you know, obvious effort to make sure that what happens on the job stays on the job. And if you, if you go outside of the chain of command, they are not going to help you. So basically, same as with the NYPD, if you go to internal affairs with something, they're going to shut you down if they don't like what you're saying and protect you if they do like it. So you run into the same problems in all bureaucracies, whether it's NYPD, City Hall, unions, or corporate structure, because everything is top down. And when you try and either climb up to the next level, the people below you are suspicious of you, and so are the people above you. So you're stuck because once you have brass buttons, you're not out on the street anymore and nobody trusts you.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot of similarities between, you know, all of these organizations because they all get rich at the same time. And chaos equals cash in construction and also in the financial markets because nobody makes any money when everything is just okay. So turmoil is what all of these groups count on, and vilifying the other party or the other guy is what their whole argument is based on, like the anybody but Trump argument. So there's clearly a lot of, political and economic mayhem on the street in New York. And by being up in these skyscrapers, I could look right down on the street and see what people were doing, like the eye in the sky in a casino. So having the inside experience in the unions and also on Wall Street, I got to see how it works with the funding of all these projects and what was going on in the actual buildings, because I learned how to chart stocks from the movie Wall Street when I was in high school. And that's when I decided to go to the trading floor instead of becoming a crane operator, which I did anyway. After all, the same bankers that are screwing up the economy now put us $1 trillion in debt with the federal bailout. And whether or not they are or not on the Epstein list, they sure know a lot of guys who are.
Yeah, this thing is crazy. I'm going through the comments here. So I'll start with Marlon. He said, yeah, she told you, and he means Pam Bondi. She told you there was videos with kids, yet they don't want to prosecute the people in the video with the kids. Chronicles of the collapse. They are lying to the public with a straight face. If that's not gaslighting, I don't know what is. Stephen S. That is an excellent question, Sal. Compromised by who? Follow the money and go where the evidence takes you. Samara Cohen still can't make sense of the Epstein case. I think all of us are sitting here baffled by this, including now people in Congress, because we thought we were getting one thing, got another. Joel Ramirez, the Trump administration looked at their options, billionaires and millionaires, or MAGA that flip-flops. Who the administration picked on the Epstein case? That's another one. Samara Cohen, again, ain't no Epstein case. Brother is gone. And Joel says, and that's why there's not, Samara. And it could, I mean, even Hood, Mayor, NYC, even the FBI doesn't trust the FBI. I think this whole case is, it has too many moving parts in it, right? Here, Catherine Chase Prescott. Netanyahu and Epstein announcement. That, people are saying something. There might have been a connection with that. I don't know, because Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, came in because there's rumors that Epstein was a Mossad agent and worked for the CIA, because apparently Acosta said this, and Acosta at the time, who was the prosecutor in Palm Beach County, and again, went on to work for the first Trump administration. Somewhere along the line, it stated that Epstein was some kind of CIA operative somewhere. So that was another thing that hit. So this thing is a shady case in itself. It's like you're in the shadows and you don't really, you in your heart and soul know what's going on. You can figure this out, but everyone else is just standing and going, well, where's the evidence of this stuff? Because this should be, James, pretty simple. But I don't see it as being simple, because they're making it very difficult by not being transparent. And here Marlon says it's true. People like Bill Ackman, billionaire hedge fund CEO, was begging for a bailout around 2020. Now he's funding all these guys. Eric Adams, he wants him the mayor because he wants to continue the corruption. He funded Andrew Cuomo because he likes corruption, Bill Ackman. I don't know why this guy became overnight. He's a deity. Oh, what he says goes. This guy's another billionaire looking to advance his own interest. He doesn't care who's in office, just as long as they do what he wants. That's how I see it. Veronica Electron, it's a mystery how Ghislaine Maxwell is still breathing. And she's a co-conspirator of a case that has no co-conspirators, much like P. Diddy, a case where he's a co-conspirator of who? Of what? And what happened to all that racketeering? Yeah, Catherine Chase Prescott. Irony, once Netanyahu boarded his plane for D.C., Epstein announcement posted. Yeah, it actually was a leak, which I believe happened. It was a leak to Axios. And then they go back and they took it down temporarily and put up the same thing, but it seems to be a different version. So I don't know. Like, it looks like a different version of it. So very odd what's going on. I don't know if you want to give you a take on that, or the corruption in City Hall. It seems all connected to me, James.
I think so as well, son. I think if you take out the names of the people involved and just look at what was done, it pretty much tells the story of it. But people's connections can, run obstruction for them. based on, who people know that they're acquainted with. Because if a guy's got a $200 million business and he was on that plane once, he doesn't want anybody knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also all this turmoil is just a continuation of a wealth redistribution that happened after September 11th, when the Patriot Act was used basically to seize people's rights. Then the Iraq War with all those riots. Then the 07-08 market crash. 2014 was another one. Then 2020 with the germ lockdown scam and Cuomo with his iron lungs. And then all this turmoil since 2023. So these are just wealth redistribution scams. And it's the regular people and the investors who don't know enough about the market to know that you can't time the market.
No, you shouldn't be able to. No, you shouldn't be doing that.
It's just too much of a risk.
Marlon's asking you directly, does James think it's the mafia that has moved into Wall Street, or is it Wall Street now adopting mafia tactics?
Well, that's exactly what it is. It's always been, the government is the big mafia and the bankers are the big mafia because they're buying up all these land tracts and building all these skyscrapers. And there's not going to be 20 made men in the crime family on a job. There's going to be the son of a captain, and he's going to be in there telling them what's going on the job. And if you know how union jobs work, you also know how it works on non-union jobs. So what they do is they can get guys to work non-union and get paid, but you don't get the benefits, and then you don't care what happens to them. Because if you have guys that are undocumented or not in the union, they're basically disposable, which is the way the city government treats New Yorkers right now. They don't care who's here. They just want more people so they can get more federal money and obfuscate what they're actually doing themselves by pointing the finger at the last guy or the next guy.
Interesting.
It is all entirely connected, but it has to do with all the big money, and that goes through Wall Street.
That's, and here, Logic's finest. This is another guy mentioned. Stephen Ross has put more money into NYC real estate in the last 12 years than anyone else. Another real estate billionaire developer. Goes on to say in another post, it's all smoke and mirrors. People look at the sexy, shiny objects, yet completely ignore the true economic engines.
I think that's true, I think, because I worked at Hudson Yards, which is owned by Stephen Ross and run by Properties. So obviously I knew who he was before I got there. And that complex is only half built. But the city took all their tax breaks and dangled them to the developer who took them. And now they don't want to build the other half. Nobody is in the top halves of any of these skyscrapers. And I'm the one looking in them. So you would have to be on the 50th floor to look in the window of an empty building in the first place. So there's nobody in the tops of these buildings. They're owned by foreign governments, oil sheiks, and they're just for tax and investment purposes. There's nobody in them.
Logic's finest has a question here. It says, ask James about Rocco Tomasetti and Joey Fama and his mafia partner, Di Benedetto.
Actually, that I'm not really up to speed on. Like, I know the name Joey Fama, but I'm not really prepared to answer on somebody's name that I don't know, because I know plenty of the names of guys that I know, did X, Y, or Z. So I'm not exactly sure about the other people that he asked about.
I see. This is very interesting. Stephen S. says, if you haven't seen the BB Files documentary, you should. Everyone should see it. I'm not giving President Trump a pass on anything. I pray for him that he stays on America First course. I say the same thing. I just, you start seeing these correlations. Catherine Chase Prescott said Trump pardoned Jonathan Pollard, arrested for trading Navy submarine confidential information to Soviets to allow Soviet Jews to migrate to Israel. Did he really? Maybe he did that in the prior administration, because I don't know I haven't heard any pardons lately. That's saying a lot. She's going on. Pollard is an ultra Zionist who is worse, if you can believe it, than Smotrich, Givar, and has a podcast YouTube. Netanyahu lobbied DC for years for his release. I always thought I've seen Netanyahu around because he used to always come by when we did the UN. He always said hello to all the cops all the time. He was a very nice guy. I didn't personally say hello to him, but he was in the vicinity. So he did come by like the one time I did do that detail. I don't really pay. To me, I like the Israeli people. Of course, foreign governments always you're a friend, but you're also I say a friend of me. So when I see the latest, hey, I hit Chuck Schumer. Here he is with Netanyahu, and then he hates him at the same time. It's literally, James, is the WWE. You know how we have
it's scripted chaos. Absolutely,
it is. Just looking at how the Iran Israel little 12-day fiasco was going on, it seems very scripted in what was going on there. And when you learn that Trump did this interview with Maria Bartiromo a couple of years ago and said how he knew Iran was going to strike them back after he struck Iran, he kind of told them he was. So if you know this was going on, then what are we doing? It's just political theater, or you're playing, but you're doing theater with people's lives. So what the hell is really going on behind the curtain? Because that whole thing, I got to be honest, there's 12 days, and I wasn't for that. I didn't want to hit Iran. I didn't know why Israel's firing back over there. They're always fighting in the Middle East over something. We don't know exactly what, but they fight each other. And then it just seemed scripted, kind of like a promo in WWE. Netanyahu goes on there, and it's a rah-rah speech, kind of like a promo in wrestling. And then Trump comes on, I'm not going to strike for 2 weeks. And all of a sudden they did something, and it just has that WWE-esque feel. I don't know if it feels organic, James, it just felt kind of like a WWE event to me.
It feels really creepy because my thinking on it is knowing Trump is a real estate developer from Queens.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had been a crane operator on Trump Tower and on Pier 17 down by the seaport. And then me being on all these big jobs, what I'm wondering is if Trump, the real estate developer, wants to just turn Gaza and the Ukraine into Trump land, because somebody's going to have to clear out 50 million tons of debris while they're getting rockets dropped on them. So that sounds like something the U.S. military is going to have to do, not a bunch of people from UNICEF.
Look at this. So wait a minute. I see something. Logic's finest. First of all, this is a good one. Rocco owns Empire Concrete, L'Aquila Construction, the biggest concrete plant and largest construction company, and Joey Fama and Di Benedetto co-own the second largest union construction company in New York City.
Gotcha. That makes a lot more sense now, because back when I started in construction, people may remember hearing about what's called the Concrete Club, which was the fixed bid system that they used to decide which family's company got the bid. So they would share part of the revenue, but they always knew that one of their companies was going to win the bid, or they'd firebomb your office like they did to a couple of guys out in Long Island in the 80s. I think Quebeca was the guy's last name. But that was over a carding dispute, and Sal Avellino and the Lucchese's ended up killing the guy and his brother-in-law. So, it's no joke when you're dealing with a big company, because they have a lot of minions, and they go right into a mom and pop shop. And if they blow up one of their trucks, they're out of business. So it's not hard to do this, because you see the amount of garbage laying around now. There's no garbage collection in Philly, and there's a mass shooting down there every day. There's no city workers there.
Yeah.
So all of the blue states and cities are complete mayhem.
I see that. And then Logic's Finest says, FYI, WTC Tower 4 is still 80% vacant. The Freedom Tower is 50% vacant. Tower 2 isn't being built. Tower 3 and Tower 4 are practically vacant. It's money laundering. That's unbelievable.
That's probably right. Like, I couldn't tell you the percentages, but I know for a fact that when you're on the 50th floor of a building looking across, there's nobody moving the drapes or walking past there. Everything's empty. So with the lack of brick and mortar stores since the lockdown, and the fact that nobody can afford to live in Manhattan unless you're really rich or really poor, there's no incentive for anybody to pay up for them, and that's where the foreign money comes from, because they all want to go down and prance around during UN week with all these diplomats, but most of the time they're dealing with the bankers.
It's always the bankers.
Always the bankers. Follow the money. It's not hard. Just follow the money.
Chronicles of the Collapse says we go from brink of World War III to Epstein clients disappearing. Yeah, that was like overnight that happened. Anthony DiMaggio, good friend of the show as well, had him on. Giuliani prosecuted Concrete Club case. They rolled the Galante hit into the trial to sexy it up for the jury.
Yeah, that was in 1979. So it was, it was a pre-event that I guess, they worked into a RICO, because as soon as you get a couple of events, you got somebody. And now everybody rats. There's nobody doing 30 years for heroin anymore.
Oh.
They go on YouTube after they rat.
Yeah, well, we have a guy I know that did that. Actually, spotlighted something I didn't know about. Samara Cohen says conspiracy show. I wouldn't say conspiracy. I'm saying I think it's like, if you're really at war with someone, I don't think you would ever tip off the people that you're at war with, hey, we're going to strike this, which is what the U.S., what Trump said, is what happened. And then when you see the way that goes down, why would these sides that are at war each other talk to each other about striking things other than it's just a part of the show? But people are dying because they're real people that are shooting and doing all kinds of things amongst each other, when the guys in charge seem to be like coordinating with each other. Now, I'm just telling you, I'm going off of what Trump said on Fox News years ago when Maria Bartiromo was saying Iran let them know that they were going to strike back after he struck them, because it's something to do with the way they do, they've always retaliated again. It just, that sticks out, because I think if two people are fight, you would say this is wrestling. We know it's, it's not kayfabe, but in the back, they're going to coordinate what they do in the ring. You can't assume that, Roman Reigns in real life doesn't like John Cena and they're wrestling each other. They talk in the back about what they're going to do. So it's scripted. So I'm kind of telling you, this is what it seems like on the surface when you watch that video with Trump say, oh, they told us that we're going to hit us back. And you're like, huh? What? I thought we guys, why is that even, like, how did that happen? I thought we were hitting them because they don't like us and we're trying to get them to capitulate. But you're speaking to them while striking them. And what was that all about? Because each rocket cost, as you know, millions and millions of dollars. It costs the same for any country doing that. And unless you have a purpose, meaning you're looking for peace or capitulation or something, I don't understand what the dialogue would be about, about we're going to strike you here. Make sure everybody's out of the way. Or they're gonna tell we're gonna strike you back, so let everybody out of the way. I thought everybody hated each other, so they don't hate each other. So why are we doing this again? Because we could talk this out without wasting money or having any lives wasted for nothing, basically. Because you're negotiating, apparently. I'm just saying, that's what it seemed like.
I think that there's not any money in peace, because what are you going to do with all these weapons and all these contracts and all these microprocessors that you can't import because of the tariffs? So that's really what it is. Again, the money. Yeah, war is big money. And so is building skyscrapers, and the banks are paying for everything. So it always goes back to the money. And if you can have a politician with a friend who runs a bank, that's a good place to start, because you can't work up from the bottom. You got to go to the top and go down.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems odd, because, you've seen things in the past where there is no speak of that, and you see things happen, but people are coordinating with each other about missile strikes. And well, wait a minute. Why are we even doing that when we could just talk this out, which is the way you want to do? I mean, you go back when we're discussing, gangsters and mafia and stuff like that. They call that a sit down, right? So you would do that to avoid conflict, which could mean bad for business, people blowing up businesses, stuff like that. I mean, I thought that's how that worked. So why would we want to blow everything up and we're still talking behind the scenes anyway? And then, oh yeah, it's over, ceasefire and all that. But You could have done that without doing the rocket. That's all I'm saying. It looks like that because you come out and said that, and you're like, huh? I didn't know that's the way it happened. I don't know. Maybe it's just me looking.
No, I think you got it right. Also, just like September 11th didn't start terrorism in America, October 7th obviously didn't start it in Israel, and this goes all the way back not only to the hostages in Iran in 1979, but the Gulf War is what led to the attack on the World Trade Center in 1993, because that was Egyptians and Palestinians who were upset that the Army and the Marine Corps were in Saudi Arabia when they had to liberate Kuwait. So that was also at the time of Black Hawk Down in Somalia, right after Ruby Ridge, when the FBI shot up a woman and a kid over a lousy weapons charge. And also the raid on Waco, which was Clinton and Janet Reno. And we all know what Clinton was up to the entire time. He didn't know a thing about foreign policy or the military because he was a pot-smoking draft dodger.
Yeah.
Among other things, clearly.
I think I always say Bill Clinton benefited from the Reagan years. He kind of benefited from that going in because he balanced the budget. But again, that was Newt Gingrich that helped out with that. So they had that was still when there was some sort of decorum, Republicans and Democrats. Now it's just like, I don't know, cliques, don't like each other, kind of like the police department. And once again, we go back to the wrestling. It reminds me a lot of wrestling. It reminds me a lot of what's not kayfabe, and you're in the ring. That's what politics has become. But you see it more and more now. And if you really pay attention, you'll say, that doesn't seem right, because you wouldn't do that yourself. People you really don't like, or maybe you shake hands, but then you're firing missiles, and that costs money, and you destroy different areas. Oh, we got to help them. We got to send construction. Oh, who's really making money here? So that's kind of what you're seeing. And again, it's all at the behest of what? Who's behind this and who's benefiting from it. And unfortunately, their lives being destroyed. And they don't really care because they're on top of the pyramid, per se. It's kind of, I know it is kind of going down all these different avenues, but it just, my take on what was going on looks like that.
Right. And I think that, they don't have to script every single move. You just know who's going to win, and then they can plan it backwards based on other opportunities that come up. So as long as they know what the goal is, they can see what it is and nobody else can. So they can skip steps, and they could always use a false flag attack. Like you could have Muslims attacking Muslims, so everybody thinks that the Israelis did it. And anytime something blows up, it's a diversion, because anybody with a gripe can go out and crash his vehicle into 1,000 people, like happened New Year's Eve in New Orleans, or happened on Halloween 2017 on the bike path on the West Side Highway in Manhattan.
I remember that.
Hudson Yards for that, and saw the entire thing. Not him going down the path, but all the emergency services there. So I ran down there and saw what happened. So I've seen, all kinds of terrorist attacks and guys killed in construction and all kinds of mayhem. But it's the political component that, combined with social media and the ability to go on YouTube and the quickness of the turnover of the news cycle, where there are no explanations or retractions or apologies, they just skip to something else.
Yeah.
But it's still part of the public record.
I like I say, I always like to stick with facts and evidence, but there is a fact that Trump did say that on air. So I'm just going to say that you could go back and look at it, and you're going to say, what does he mean by they were calling him, and what is that about? Because then you would say then a lot of that stuff could be averted, because why use force when you don't have to? Kind of like the police department, where the last resort is force, unless you could get someone to capitulate by doing what they call verbal judo, commands. Sir, don't do this. Sir, I'd like to talk to you. We could talk, you and I, and the situation de-escalates. But a lot of these people want to escalate things, and I don't know. Is it to fire their weapons, or who knows? And maybe there's a changing of the guards behind the scenes. So the old now is becoming new. New people are going to take over soon with everything all around the world. New people getting elected, so they have a different vision that they don't want all this war, and they don't. So I don't know. But Marlon says it best here. There is a lot more going on, a lot of what we are being told and see playing out in the media is to distract. And he continues, the biggest problem is the economy and the 10-year bond. It is indicating more major problems that they don't want people to know.
That's another thing is that, people are a little bit distracted by what the Dow Jones or the stock market is, because that's not an accurate indicator of the fundamentals. That's what people think it's worth. So when something triggers a market crash, like a terrorist attack or a lockdown, it's going to go down to the levels where the fundamentals support it, because that's exactly where the banks are going to go in and buy it back low. So a regular person can't trade the market even if they're staring at their computer screen, because they don't know what the announcements are going to be, and the government and the banks do. So that's all factored into a lot of their decisions, and people hear something and want to react to it. They have no idea what led up to it. And just like Trump with the tariffs, he shook out about $11 trillion worth of people's money when it tanked, and then it went right back up. So obviously anybody around him knew he was going to say that. So just like after September 11th, they should be looking at who was profiting in the stock market, just like they should have looked at who was shorting the airlines. Because if that's inside information and somebody placed a trade, that should be looked into.
Yeah.
That's why you have Nancy Pelosi making $300,000 a year, but she's worth $200 million.
Yeah,
Same thing.
I see this. Samara Cohen said Trump said he would bomb Iran when he was running. Harris said don't. That's true. And she also says, tell us why cranes are always falling over in Manhattan. One even caught on fire. That is a good question. I see that does happen. You see cranes falling everywhere.
That is a good question. And actually that crane on fire, like when you're up on top of a building, you can see other cranes all over the place. So you can tell when one's on fire or when one peels off the side of a building. So 2008, maybe there was an East Side crane that collapsed, and it ended up crushing a sports bar I used to hang out at.
Oh,
So you could turn over a wheelbarrow and nobody cares. But if you turn over a crane in Manhattan or dump 20 tons of steel on 10th Avenue, you're not on the 6 o'clock news. You are the 6 o'clock news.
correct.
First thing they want to do is get in there and drug test the guy, rather than say it was inadequate maintenance or metal fatigue or foreign parts or something like that reflects on the organization. So they'll cut any individual guy and throw you to the wolves, and you'll end up digging swimming pools, which is a lot better because you can get a tan and have a place to swim.
And I guess the unions don't defend those. They're just too busy endorsing Eric Adams and running around with that guy and saying he's the savior of New York City.
Exactly. And the membership is apparently, to my estimation, is overwhelmingly Trump, or doesn't know anything about it. But all the administrations and all the unions push all blue all the time because they're all hooked up with Biden's infrastructure bill, which is about $1 trillion, the same as the DOD budget. So there's a lot of fraud and graft there. So, if they ever wanted to put Elon Musk on looking at the infrastructure project, that might be a good place to start, because you don't hear anything about it. And look at all the highways and bridges and tunnels. And you just had a foreign military vessel crash into the Brooklyn Bridge. And that was one of the bridges that I worked on for Kiewit Construction and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And they're the ones that had to dig out the Francis Scott Key Bridge and dredge that out exactly a year before in Baltimore. That's an infrastructure attack and an insurance scam on an old vessel with a third country flag. So you could call it whatever you want, but FEMA pays for it. The Army Corps of Engineers and Kiewit dredges it out, and then they get to rebuild it. So that's like the same reason that, they can make car tires that never wear out, but you can't sell the guy 4 new ones every 2 years. So that's built-in obsolescence. They get rid of older structures, same as they burn down vacant warehouses.
It's just interesting because I remember when that happened in Baltimore. I don't think that bridge has been rebuilt either. Yet it's all this time later. That in itself is like, what's going on there? Because again, the infrastructure projects, this is something Trump always screamed about, but yet does anyone in Congress work? I don't know, because they they don't seem to ever do anything. It's no matter who's in charge, they just at a standstill. And that's one thing I give Trump credit for. He's trying to push people around and do things. He's doing things to the limit of what a president can do. But there's no, like, Lone Silence says, our country has spent trillions on infrastructure, but everything is still in a state of disrepair. Money being laundered and skimmed back to crooks.
Absolutely.
And here you got, look at this. You have Nancy Pelosi. Here it is, her trading. Look, how do you have a portfolio like this when you're in Congress? I don't get it.
She's smarter than Jamie Dimon, apparently. That's another building I worked on, 270 Park, the JP Morgan corporate headquarters. So,
JP Morgan, yeah.
So I worked on BlackRock headquarters at Hudson Yards and JP Morgan headquarters. And those are the guys running all these real estate scams that are buying up the Ukraine and Gaza, because that is also just a land deal. And any place in the United States where you're having all these floods and fires, I guarantee there's lithium and cobalt under them.
That's interesting. I didn't know they were buying up land over there, because then that would be why you hit the area, you decimate it. Oh, we'll rebuild it. And there you go.
Yeah, you got to dig out all that debris, but you have to be protected by the military because they're still shooting rockets at it.
Correct.
So what happens the next time there's a truck bombing against a U.S. facility overseas? Does Trump blow up the whole country?
Geez, I hope not.
So eventually that's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. But the thing is, what led up to it and who's going to profit from it? Because that's what everybody's going to look at. And they're just running a regular old Times Square 3-card Monte on everybody. And nobody knows, who's going to come up snake eyes at the end until something actually happens. But then who profits from it?
Here's a good one from Lone Silencer. Rumor has it Warren Buffett takes tips from Pelosi on what stocks to buy and sell. She is the Jordan of stock trading. Wink, wink. LOL. She does have a giant portfolio, and it's quite alarming to see somebody in Congress. At one point, she was the Speaker of the House. She's worth a lot of money. You're like, how does a career politician do this? And there's no checks and balances, and what they say and do can affect stocks, bonds, everything. And there's never any accountability, it seems, in my view. I did want to ask you one thing, because you did mention John Panisi. So John Panisi, he's a mob associate. Well, he wasn't a mob. He became an informant for the government. I believe he was. Was in the Lucchese family or the Colombo family?
I think he was with the Lucchese's. He does really good work. Like, he's got a good delivery, and if you ever check up on some of his stuff, it seems to be pretty accurate. So. He's a good guy to listen to as far as I can tell, but I'm not a content consumer, and I only started an Instagram to see how it works, and it's worse than I thought. So, that's not something I put my time into, but I'll try and contact the guy and talk to him off the air or email him. But, you have to be able to back up what you say on air, like Trump, because if somebody points it out to you and now you're doing a 180, they'll call you a flip-flopper, but you could say, well, I got new information and my opinion on it, evolved.
That's true.
They're both true.
Yeah. But now, so with John now, he has his own, I believe it's on YouTube. It's at Sit Down News. And he also goes by that on X. John is interesting because, as you know, John was the one where it came to my attention, referenced the aforementioned self-admitted criminal mob associate, Jimmy Rodriguez. Jimmy Rodriguez is the former owner of Jimmy's Bronx Cafe, Don Coqui. He ran Con Sofrito as the manager, allegedly, and now owns Sobro Garden, where someone was stabbed recently, and nobody's supposed to talk about that because it's Jimmy Rodriguez. But he made a whole segment around outing this guy as a mob associate, because apparently there was some kind of a rub out. Jimmy wanted to borrow $2 million from John Panisi, and the guy owns Don Coqui. It's not like he always brags about knowing all these people, but somebody wanted to borrow money from Mr. Panisi. And going over there, they realized there was going to be a hit on John Panisi. He was going to try to rub him out because City Island only has one way in and one way out. So John Panisi is the reason the world found out that Jimmy Rodriguez is a mob associate, therefore, for the Lucchese's. Because there was another guy that was going to be at that meeting that ended up recently was indicted a year ago or so, but for drugs. So take that for what you will. But John was the one that even put this out and showed the picture, whatever, of Jimmy. And he met him and he spoke a lot about him. And you're saying to yourself, what the hell is this guy, Jimmy, mixed up with the New York City Police Department if he's mixed up with a guy like John Panisi and the Lucchese crime family? Because that would all contradict itself. And mind you, James, remember what I was terminated for? They said that I was associated with someone who was reasonably believed to have engaged in or liked to have engaged in criminal activity, i.e. Roger Stone. Shout out to Roger, by the way, for being the first person that ever exposed Jeffrey Epstein in the book, The Clintons' War on Women, which is why he ended up getting indicted, because the Clintons were furious over that, especially Hillary. So that was how that whole Jeffrey Epstein, he didn't even know about Jeffrey Epstein stuff until that book. It's in that book. A lot of stuff that ended up becoming true. He spoke to one of those victims. What was her name? Drew Frey. Unfortunately, she passed away recently. Questionable suicide or whatever they're saying about that, but she's no longer with us. He interviewed her for that book, so there was a lot there. But the police department, James, said Roger's a criminal, but apparently, what is Jimmy? And what is, I mean, so you're not supposed to hang around a political figure versus hanging around a mob guy. I thought cops were supposed to go after the mob guy, but apparently not, because they've been partying with that guy forever and ever and ever until this day. Meanwhile, John Panisi put it straight out there, the guy's a mob associate, and here's the whole thing that happened with me. And he later became an informant. So he's not a liar. He's been deemed credible by the courts. So I don't know. You tell me, James. I don't know if you can make anything out of it, or if you know who Jimmy is, or anything involving the Lucchese's with that.
Well, I know that the Lucchese's had a Bronx faction and a Brooklyn faction, and you're right about City Island, because my father used to keep his houseboat up there. So if you're on that bridge, you could keep somebody on that island unless they're leaving by boat. So that's a real little place. And, you know, it's tucked away up there. And you could run basically whatever you want out of a port. Because if you could do something on the water with nobody around, why do it on land? So the ports are totally insecure, worse than the borders. And you could always walk in through Canada as long as, you know, the bears didn't get you. Because there's already been terror plots against upstate water treatment facilities, hydro plants. You have all these drones now looking at everybody. And the Chinese government owns about 380,000 acres, I think, of U.S. farmland. And why are we continuing to catch Chinese and Ukrainian military-age men at all these border crossings? So all this stuff is hooked up together, because you could bring a guy into the country who knows a lot of stuff, doesn't have it on his phone, and now we go tell somebody in the United States, and you can't track it.
You know, you are right. There was a lot of Chinese dissidents, will say, captured at the border, and you go, well, I thought it was just people from South America. No, and that was a lot going on under Joe Biden there. But on the President Trump, obviously, there's like next to zero border crossings. And although people don't like the heavy-handed approach, I always say to go to the courthouse was something I said as a cop. Because remember, the NYPD, we're not allowed to notify ICE about anything. It's like disgusting. You can't do that. But where they can get you is the courthouse. Courthouses, going in and out of court. You have cases or immigration status hearings. ICE can show up and scoop you up. I actually said a long time ago that I thought that was probably the safest route. because you never know if you go after someone, if they have weapons, friends of theirs, it's going to be a big shootout. The courthouse not even allowed with guns. You can pick them up right there. It's the easiest thing to do. People could scream about the ethics and tactics of it, but it's legal. And it's the easiest way to, grab somebody who's not legally here or has subverted the system per se, overstayed their visas, stuff like that. And you could carry on. That's your job as Homeland Security. So I have to say, I don't have a problem with them doing that. It's a law it's legal on the books, how they do it. So, I mean, I don't think you should show up to Home Depot, now, now you're going a whole, they find the ICE agents inside the Home Depot. Apparently they're going around the pizzerias. I don't know. Now we're starting to go into people that do jobs. And I always like to say, you have to look at, have these people paid into a system? Some, I don't know if people realize you could be you have a visa, but you pay taxes. So technically, is this person someone you really want to deport because they're trying to do the right thing? They may not have entered legally, but they've been paying into the system. Some have been waiting to have that immigration hearing for years because there's no immigration judges. But that's a whole thing that's very interesting. But I don't have a problem with ICE going to the courthouse, because I used to say, I wish they were here in all the New York courts every day, because there's a ton of these people that come in, many that overstay their visas, many that are also criminals. But, we don't ever go for that, apparently, And I think that the courts are the easiest part to go, get the criminals in there,
I think you're exactly right, because at least they went through the metal detectors. And if a guy thinks he might get picked up going to court, he's going to skip. So you could go get him on that. So if a guy's here illegally and he's working and he never gets arrested, okay. But as soon as he gets a DWI or beats his wife, he should be going to Guantanamo Bay.
You know how many guys I got that were DWI? Some that were multiple offenders that were, undocumented, yet you would lock them up with different names, different IDs. It's like they change their names. They try to, hide who they are. But you cannot notify ICE of their presence in the system, whether they have a ICE detainer warrant or not, this was something that was on the books. And I said that. And they think that Eric Adams is going to change that. You can't. It's a law. And they need to change that, but you need to change the people that are in office, like, vote different councilmen. But you can't do it where, you just file an executive order and try to change the things. Here, Marlon chimes in, says, Trump is also about to push amnesty for hotel, restaurant, and farm working illegals. That might be an issue. That might be an issue. Lampwick, Sal, Delray Beach PD does a sting for shoplifting at Home Depot. Swarm. That's funny, because the police department, I don't know. Like, it's hard for me to see a police department enforcing illegal immigration, but now Florida could do that. So you might be seeing more of that. And then maybe that would quell some of the issues, Samara Cohen says, remember, Sal, they don't want movers for equipment violations. Yeah, that's the NYPD. Yeah, she says also, you're supposed to make notification for certain calls, but no one makes them because they're lazy and just don't know and don't care. Yeah, she just hit the NYPD the nail on the head. Many cops who should be notifying people, they don't. Like I said, I called ICE one time and told, never do that again. The guy wasn't illegal in the cell. He didn't have a visa, nothing. I forgot what he did. And they said, so ICE was on the phone with me, but to go to court, there has to be some kind of coordination. And of course, no one at NYPD was going to talk to them, because I think they called once the precinct, and then they called central booking. Central booking was like, what are you talking about? And then they called the precinct, and I said, I don't control what they do. And then the supervisor said, we're not supposed to technically do that and all this stuff. So I said, okay. That's how I learned that law or that procedure firsthand because they says you can't do that. So
The NYPD not working with ICE is like the Army not working with the Navy. Like, you're supposed to have the same goal, but it'd be nice if you knew who was going to get there first. So it's set up to fail because they're diametrically opposed on every single issue. There's the way the feds want it, and there's the way the cities and the states want it. And that's where all the crybabies are.
yeah,
You don't see any rednecks picketing all of these DEI protests or anything like that. But every time anything has anything to do with the Republicans or the more traditional people, that's where you have all these wackos and professional protesters and 30-year-old students on student visas. And you just can't keep track of them all. So they mass up in all these places where there's 70,000 college kids, like the University of Texas, and you can't possibly tell who's who because you're right by the border, and there's Indian and Chinese students in all these engineering programs, and
True.
they just caught 2 Chinese spies with a bioweapon in Michigan, which is rife with commies and Muslims right on the border, and Tim Walz is the governor. 2 politicians there just got assassinated, and he's been taking money from China for his entire political life.
and wanted to be the vice president.
Yeah,
That's
well,
great.
here's another thing. Now, the other guy who wanted to be vice president was Josh Shapiro. He got his house firebombed.
All but by his constituents, all people that voted Democrat, by the way. So
It doesn't really matter who does it. It matters what they do and what the reaction is.
well, yeah, because I think that they're a radical element of that entire apparatus. We'll say the radical elements are the one you need to be, because they might say whatever they are, Republican, Democrat, blue, green, red, but you know what they really are? They just want to affect change through force. And
if they can label you a domestic terrorist, that's better for them because they can say they're anti-terrorism, but they could get people at a church that are protesting against abortion and make it like they're a bunch of skinheads.
True. That's another thing too. There's a big war on Christians. It really is.
Christians have always been okay to slaughter. Ask the Romans when they were thrown into the lions.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been a policy on you can't kill Catholics.
Yeah, it's been like, that's one of the main things. And these radicals, and I don't like when that's why we in the NYPD we would always have the house of worships we protected because of that. It was always, you never know, churches, synagogues, mosques, stay away from that, really. But that, if you're some radical, you're gonna go for the biggest. You want the biggest effect, the biggest casualty number with the least amount of work you have to do. So that's what they like targeting. Places like that. I mean, I think there was something that happened a couple of days ago in a church. It's really gut wrenching to watch that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
no.
People are always susceptible to these vehicle attacks because the guy doesn't need a weapon. If you get a pickup truck and put cinder blocks in the back, you're not going to be stopped by all those bodies. And anytime there's a no gun zone, the people who have guns legally leave them home, and the criminals carry them.
That's true.
So there's 2 sides to all of this. And just like there's a difference between the law and justice, there's differences between all these things, but people conflate the terms like the law and justice, which is 2 different things. Because the law can be changed, erased, burned, or ignored. And justice is carved in stone tablets, which even if you smash them, you can put them back together, or you can crack the guy who broke them in the head with one. So
True.
Different things.
So I have a few comments here. Logic's Finest says, so because immigration laws were loosely enforced, that's okay. But now that immigration laws are being tightly enforced, that's a bad thing. Explain that to me, someone, please. Actually, no. What we're saying here is you probably have in the neighborhood of 30 million, if not more, people that would be identified as illegal. You are not deporting these people. I hate to tell you, you're not. You don't have the immigration judges, courts. You don't have the personnel. What you're trying to do is you're going to target the criminal element of that part. And there's a lot of criminals there. There's a lot of criminals that came. They're gang members. They all kinds of stuff. That's the element that you want removed. As far as people that have been here for a while, law-abiding, meaning they haven't gotten into trouble. They might have came illegally, but they pay their taxes and stuff. What do you do with those? Are you saying we're going to throw them in a cell with a gangbanger when they're trying to pay their way into society? That's why I'm big with every case needs to be looked at individually. You can't clump everyone in together.
Right.
And if you go with that, at some point, unfortunately, whether it's Trump or some other president, some kind of pathway to citizenship for everyone here that has not gotten in trouble and has tried to do the right thing has to come about it, because you cannot deport all these people. You want criminals out of here. And there's plenty of them. Trust me. You could look around and you'll see them. And you'll also hear about the repeat offenders. Like I told you, repeat DWI guys that they have 5 different names on 5 arrests, 5 different names. That guy don't belong here. Sorry. But that, these are the things that you could target as far as Homeland Security. But to run around and, remember too, some of these people do jobs that nobody wants to do. Like on a farm. They're picking they're picking apples. Do you want to do that? Somebody here tell me they want to do that. Because Americans do other jobs. So you have to look at everything. It's a very hard thing to realize when you look at it, the way I'm telling you, but it's the only way to move forward. And I'm talking about overall with immigration. We can't look at it like everyone's got to go. But who's everyone? Because there's people that actually are trying to. The only thing they did wrong is enter the country not legally. Let's say they came on a boat. They walked over the border, but they've done everything else right. They've stayed out of trouble. They pay taxes. They do all that. They just can't get a citizenship. Some that are in hearings waiting. But again, and there's others that have straight up thugs, straight up criminals. And like I said, and they're allowed to linger here, and they're creating families that now those families become criminals because he's a criminal. So it goes on. That's where you have to look at it individually. And unfortunately, you can't get anyone in Congress or the Senate to come together on anything. That's another problem. And Trump is trying to do what he's supposed to do. But again, he's one guy. He's going to run out of time. And it's really a shame. And I see it here too in the comments. Lampwick said, I called ICE. They said press number 2 for English. Steven S says, don't get me started on LAPD Special Order 40. Sounds like the same problem with NYPD and LAPD. Yeah, that's the truth. It's a marathon. Good luck getting in touch with gang at 0200 hours. They're all at home sleeping. Yeah, I remember those days, and you notify nobody's answering. You're like, they're snoring. What's going on? Rob Lucas chimes in. He's the executive perspective. He's one of the co-hosts. The idea was to protect the victim if she was illegal, to ensure they come forward to report an illegal immigrant criminal should be immediately reported. But they don't do that. That's the problem. Is that should be this policy in place, but it's not on the books per se. And New York is very, as you know, it's very liberal, and there's no way of trying to reel that in. Unfortunately, Logic's Finest says, where are the largest amount of illegal aliens? Yeah, California, Texas, Florida, New York, the 4 biggest electoral votes states, and as follows: 54, 40, 30, 28, and the 4 states with the most members of Congress and federal money. And Logic's Finest, they don't bring anything forward to try to have any comprehensive immigration reform, tackle this. There's nothing. They just let it linger. Yay, we get a bill passed. It's all, it's another ominous bill. Hood Mayor NYC, it wasn't a problem in the 80s when the illegals were doing yard work and nannies for Republicans. Yeah, I'm telling you, it was Reagan even tried this by doing some kind of amnesty for people. People got upset at the time, but at least he did something, because nobody wants to do anything. They just kick the can down the road, and it's come to a point. 30, 40, 50, 60 million people might be here illegally. What are you doing? You know, you could solve this and have one blanket policy, and like going forward, you would end all of this because it'd be a law and all, but they don't do that. And you don't just, it's gonna cost a lot of money in the future.
Absolutely. And I don't blame anybody for trying to get into the United States. I blame the people who are supposed to be catching them for not doing their job. But if I'm sneaking in the United States, the first thing I'm doing is knocking up an American woman, which makes it harder for them to deport you.
Yeah, yeah,
So
too.
if you have an American kid, which is part of Trump's thing about birthright citizenship, if you get here and you go to City Hall and get married and end up with an American kid, they're never going to get down to you far enough on the list to get rid of you. Then you invite your family over and they overstay their visa, and now you got a little crime cartel going, and it's cleared on paper.
I agree. I could see this as an issue. I don't know how you move forward because you have to come up with some kind of solution, and you're gonna have to come to some kind of agreement where there's gonna be people that don't like what they hear, but that's the problem. You have to tackle this one way or the other. So Logic's Finest says, my uncle was a local 40 New York City union iron worker. He wouldn't work for $10 with zero benefits package, but illegal aliens will in southern states. And you know what the problem is? People that hire them. You have to look at the actual people that employ people, that's where the real gist of this begins, not the little guy on the totem pole. Why are you even hiring this kind of labor? Oh, yeah, it's cheap. That's what it is.
Exactly. And it's clearly that, it's never as safe as union work because you don't have to go through all that training, and you could just go to a different job site if you get in an argument with a guy. But, there's lots of fights on construction sites because there's 3,000 guys on there. It's 100 degrees. Everybody thinks they're special. Everybody's got a problem with their wife putting her rear end on Instagram or whatever, seeing their kids. They drink on the way home. You get a DWI. Now you lose your job. You can't make your child support. So you go rob a liquor store. Game over.
True.
So there's lots of stuff that guys deal with. And I'm not trying to confuse being a construction worker with being NYPD or FDNY or being in the military or anything like that. There's just there's just a lot more guys working construction than there are on the job.
True.
There's 30,000 NYPD cops. There's 400,000 operating engineer crane operators in the country. And there's 2,500 guys right in the local in New York City.
So Mara Cohen says they steal and use drugs on construction sites too. That's
Sure they do.
Yeah, that's another
There's
problem.
cans on these jobs. It smells like weed, even with the vapes. It's like being in a prison. It's a steel structure with concrete slabs and 3,000 guys in there. So it functions like a prison. I'm a part prison guard and part prisoner in a steel cage for 72 hours a week with everybody behind me.
Logic's Finest says it's not the illegal aliens per se. It's the non-union employers artificially keeping wages super low who work with the same banks as major developers, FYI. That's true.
Exactly.
Lone Silencer said these days politicians spend more time cutting promos on each other versus getting work done. It is like a typical 3-hour TV wrestling show where you barely get 30 minutes of actual action. It's true. And again, Logic's Finest had said, so the non-union employers artificially suppress wages, then say they can't find Americans due to jobs. Lies. They do it. I told you, it's the top. It's the guy on top. Hood Mayor NYC, or they can join the military like my pops did when he came from the Bahamas. That's always a good thing also, but I don't know if people want to do that. They make excuses these days for everything, So James, I had you on, like we've been on for a while. We touched up on a lot of different things. Is there anything you want to say in closing, and also if anyone could follow you or reach out to you any which way, you have anything you want to share with anyone, how they could contact you if they want to talk to you?
Well, I've been doing some work with a podcaster from Pennsylvania who does a lot of long-form documentaries. So because I've never seen Instagram until very recently, and I don't really have the patience or the inclination to chase people down to find them. So he's going to handle everything, but he's an extremely talented guy. And he's doing a documentary on the Buffalino crime family in Pennsylvania, which was featured in The Irishman.
Yeah, I remember that.
But there's
Yes.
always been like other crime families besides New York, but everybody in New York thinks they're the capital of the world and nobody else exists. So most of these guys, like on Wall Street, they're famous for getting caught. Like if Jordan Belfort was better at his job, nobody know his name.
True.
So
You gotta
I
wear a
don't
lot.
have anything like, I'm not a content guy. Like, I don't want to do a podcast because you guys have to do so much research and put stuff out. And I just got done working 72 hours a week and I might move down to Florida. So, I do have a couple of things coming out because of my, experience at the World Trade Center with the truck bomb on September 11th. So that's coming up in 2 months. So that's pretty interesting. But, I'll have to see how the creative work progresses because, my friend's a busy guy and I kind of dropped this on him and he said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. But, he's got a lot of things going with this, major production. So he's going to try and catch me up as far as like a website and things like that. But I'm really a quiet guy. Like it's an effort for me to talk about stuff that I know because I would rather be the guy that knows than the guy that blabs.
Well, you've been a fascinating guest, though, James. You're very in tune with this whole construction and union and labor and all that and banking, and you know a lot of the subject. So I think you do have a future if you want to do your own show, or if you want to come back at another time, we could always get into whatever project you are on. But I just wanted, if anybody, maybe people could start following you, or maybe you start your own X account or something, and then people could follow you there. Before I let you go, Logic's Finest said something right here, and it just basically sums up what we were saying before. Blanket deportation sounded nice, but the reality is close the border, get criminals out, sort through the backlog, change the immigration laws and process, then reopen the border. And then the next one, but rational thought doesn't win elections, emotions do.
Exactly.
I couldn't say better. Logic's fine. That is well put. You get the comment of the day by actually pointing out what I've been trying to say, because that's it. That's it in a nutshell. All right, James. I definitely want to have you back on, or hopefully you could get online too, so people can start following you and you put out the material, because I think you have a wealth of knowledge underneath that skull of yours there in your brain. So I think your voice would be it'd be well worth it for you to have your voice out in the field per se.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. So I look forward to doing it again. Thanks very much for your time.
No, thank you, James. It's been an honor to have you here, and very informative, I'd say. Very informative. So there you go. There's James Jordan. I hope he does come online, because I think him joining the fray as another voice is well worth it. He's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to stock markets, Wall Street, and I hear Marlon talk like that a lot. Marlon Bethel, and he is on the same wavelength. So I think it'd be worth it for him, and hopefully either he joins social media, maybe starts his own podcast, so he'll come back when he's doing that documentary. But now it is time to have my producer's take. I'm sure Jack just heard a bunch of stuff there and couldn't believe anything. I want to know if you had a good breakfast this weekend, Jack.
Yeah, so Sunday morning, I woke up and I decided I was in the mood for some processed meat. Very rare thing. I didn't know if it was ham or sausage. And I turned on a baseball game that we were both interested in, and I decided to order a bacon, egg, and cheese. And it tasted very bad because coincidentally, as I was eating it, I was watching John Bacon, the home plate umpire, from Sunday's game between the Mets and the Yankees at Citi Field, the Subway Series finale. Mets had a chance to sweep. Yankees wanted to salvage the final game of the 3-game set. But the home plate umpire was absolutely awful, calling strikes 5 feet off the plate in different counties, high and low. Aaron Judge, of course, got all these really bad strikes called against him. But then I want to show our audience what I would like to call the fateful at bat between Devin Williams and Luis Torrens. Williams, of course, the embattled Yankees closer who's trying to earn his way back into favorability with Aaron Boone and the fan base, throws 3 changeups to Torrens, one swinging strike, 2 called strikes that were not even close to the strike zone. And then, of course, Carlos. I mean, look at these pitches for everyone kind of taking a look at this. Pitches 2 and 3 are clearly way off the plate. And Williams strategically, knowing that Bacon had a nice breakfast sandwich waiting in the umpire's locker room and a flight to catch back home, decided he was in a rush to end the ball game. Listen, guys, I never like to see these sorts of things. I think the umpiring on Sunday, as it so happened to be, was horrible on both sides. Like, it was awful to see the game end the way it did with the manager being ejected on bad calls. But I'd like to get the audience's opinion on this as well. Sal and I were texting back and forth on this. I think that it's time for robo umpires in Major League Baseball because I'm tired of games being dictated, counts being altered, at bats being decided by the men wearing black and white uniforms behind home plate. And even more concerning to me is this dilemma of a pitcher's friendly or a hitter friendly umpire. Like, no, if you're going to stand behind home plate, call balls and strikes. That's exactly what we do when it comes to politics. That's what you need to do when it comes to baseball. I think it's time for the ABS system to finally be implemented. What say you?
I agree with you. That was some of the worst umpiring I have seen on Sunday. I feel like this guy wanted to just go. He was just, I don't know. He was already thinking about the flight out of New York, whatever it is. He was thinking everything. He was calling ball. You could probably throw the ball to the backstop. He would have said that's a strike. At that point, he just wanted to get the hell out of there. And you can't do that. You know, these games are important. They can have ramifications for, first place, season, things, one game decide. Oh, how about the money? People betting. And here you are, you're in a rush to get the hell out of here. They're just calling everything a strike. It was crazy what he was doing. But he did that all weekend. You got to pay attention to where he was. I think he wasn't home. He's on plate on Sunday, but he was on he might have been down the line in the other game. So
yeah, third base on Saturday, second base on Friday night.
You can watch the calls he's making and what in that look he has on his face when people like try to say, "What are you doing?" And there's a lot of guys like that. And you see that game. I'm going to be honest. That game was quite disturbing how it ended. How this guy those balls were so far out of the strike zone. He was doing that all day too. So it's like you can really affect.
There was a strike 3 call on Jason Dominguez where he literally turned around and said, "Did you call that a strike?" Like he was so
Yeah, I remember that.
He thought it was like literally so far outside that it was practically in the other batter's box. And in like a very hesitant fashion, he wound up and did like the strike 3 called, and Dominguez like was taken aback and was like, "Wait, was that a strike? Like, what's going on?" No, this happens all over baseball. And this is especially true with the old school umpires who are kind of changing the strike zone as the game progresses, or it differs with the pitcher on the mound. If you have Zach Wheeler or someone else out there, like, I'm really sick and tired of this. I went to a spring training game down here in Florida back in March with the ABS system. I took out my phone and I calculated the time. It took all of about 10 to 15 seconds between when the batter challenged the call and the umpire made the final ruling for ABS to take its course. And the whole audience, everyone in the stands, got to see the call in real time and the instant replay on the scoreboard. I was saying to myself, how can we possibly not implement this? Now, later on in the game, there was a challenge where there was faulty technology. And I said to myself, when that happened, oh, well, maybe that's why. Like, this is a very imperfect system right now. But even with it having rough spots around the edges, so to speak, I would still like to see the ABS in Major League Baseball at some point this season. I have trouble believing that with all this sophisticated technology, they're ignoring all the advancements at place, and they're just pushing them to the side. Speaking of unions, James was a union guy. You were a union guy. I was a union guy. My union was not as good as you guys' union. But anyway, like, I'm curious to see how the umpires' unions respond to all of these things? Because our
Oh,
umpires are going to be put out of work. Are they going to get pay decreases? Like, the umpires union is very, very good. Remember, they've defended many members of the union who've been awful at their job and allowed them to keep their job. Most recently with Angel Hernandez, who filed a racial discrimination lawsuit against Major League Baseball, which got ripped up because he's not good at his job. So the umpires unions are very strong. How they respond with ABS slowly being massaged into the game is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, Samara Cohen actually said Angels Hernandez. That's funny. Rob Lukash said Jack wants to defund baseball. No way. That's funny. No, it's not that, Rob. You watched this game. I mean, this guy, there's clearly something going on. I see the same thing. I was Saturday, I was at the Marlins game, which we won, by the way. The Marlins did win. So now I'm there. 6 games this year. I've been there for 4 victories. But Marlins, who have been playing a good game, you see the same thing. There's calls. I'm all the way in like center. I'd say center right field, or you could be in center field, but you could see directly to home plate from there. It's very clear because you could, you go get the cafecito stand I like to go to, and you could see the ball and you could watch it on TV. You go, what the hell is that umpire looking at? That ball is right down the freaking middle. It's a ball. Then the strike is something that's almost bouncing. I think these guys just want to get out of there, and I think the robo umpiring is the way to go. And Samara says, bad calls make the game better. That could also affect a season and betting, which is the biggest thing. People bet on this stuff, and they're like, that just cost the game. That was a call. Just changed everything. Because that's the difference between winning a game. It's a difference between having nobody out, guys on base, 1 out, 2 outs. It affects everything. And here he is calling balls. So here's the strike zone. The ball's all the way over here. Strike. That's what they're doing. Watch it closely and say, what is he looking at? So it's true.
So people are going to call me a Debbie Downer for making this point, but even when a bad call negatively impacts the other team, whether it be my rival or just the opponent for the day, I'm still upset. Like I'm at heart a sports fan first and foremost. I like sports, then I like the teams playing in a specific sport, as weird as that may sound. And as I get older, I've become more like that, which makes it that much more painful to watch these horrible calls. And it's also in the NFL where referees and umpires don't know where the first down marker is. Like if you're a little bit over it, is that a first down? If you're an inch behind it, do you round up like they do in math? Like the refereeing in sports, this human element, the same goes for the NBA and all these arbitrary judgments with 3-second rules in the paint. It's like, it's become very weird too, because I think everyone's pointing out like the technological advancements. 20 years ago, there was no AI 3D strike zones that allowed you to see things in real time. So I feel like we were not necessarily as critical of referees back then. But with the way things have evolved, we're almost able to be much better referees on our couches watching things frame by frame broken down as opposed to in real time. The human eye is going to make mistakes. So let's correct it and have all these wonderful measures in place as precautions in case they mess up, which they inevitably will. That's my 2 cents anyway.
I agree. And Logic's Finest says pitchers understood that an umpire might have a tight or a loose strike zone, but they asked to be consistent. If your strike zone is big, be consistent. Same if tight. That is not.
This is a loose strike zone.
That's as loose as it gets right there. That is terrible. But Jack, what do you got for us on the way out here?
Yeah, on the way out, just before we get out for the day, I put an article out on X about Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams splitting hairs and about how one of them should drop out. But I would like to frame the back page of today's New York Daily News in the Louvre right next to the Mona Lisa, because that's how good this is. No, you drop out. Adams blasts Cuomo, call for mayor to quit race, rips arrogance after 12-point loss to Mamdani. So this has almost become a better battle between Cuomo and Adams versus Mamdani, because Cuomo and Adams are kind of like battling each other because they're all fighting for the same votes when you think about it. Most of the Democrats that voted for Mamdani are going to stay voting for him. So they're fighting for the independents that are undecided and maybe the Republicans who are not totally sold on Curtis Sliwa, right? Like that's the small demographic they're going for. But everyone pushing people in the various directions within that demographic is very split. We all know that the bigwigs have put all of their eggs in the basket of getting Eric Adams back into City Hall because he represents their agenda, and they've revised the reality. Up until today, everyone forgot about what happened over the past year because they're so disenchanted with Mamdani. But it's been like a very weird battle to monitor, which is ultimately going to be counterintuitive. That's kind of my producer's take for the day. If Adams and Cuomo stay in the race and they keep fighting and splitting votes, Mamdani's just going to watch the Dead Sea part and walk right through the center line with a very commanding lead the entire way. So I think that everyone needs to take Jim Walden's idea. At some point, we need to have an independent analysis polling everyone who's thinking about who they're going to vote between Sliwa, Walden, Cuomo, and Adams. And the best man, the man that receives the most votes, everyone rallies behind him. I think that's the best solution here.
I still tell you that the real poll shows Eric Adams at 4%. Everything is a scam. You got to learn the world of Eric Adams, where perception management via the low information narrative talking points is the only way this guy has made it this far. And the real poll, Eric Adams, 4%. Everyone else, 25 to 35%, and that'll vary, and that's what they're really.
It's funny you talk about perception management. That's exactly what it is. But let's not forget about like this altering of reality that's come from everyone involved. I don't care if it's John Catsimatidis and the Hamptons talking about how good Adams is. Nicole Maliotakis going on the big weekend show on Fox News and talking about the mass exodus in the NYPD and how that's going to continue under Mamdani. Knock, knock, Missy. Who do you think all of these problems began under? Like, we're constantly revising everything that's taken place to prop this guy up. And at some point, we just have to pull the plug and say, listen, it's not going to work anymore. We need to go with Andrew Cuomo. We need to figure out an alternative solution because this guy constantly like stumbles over his own feet. We're not trying to do this. Like, we were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt until this morning. But then lo and behold, he does something stupid again. Guys, we always sit in front of the camera and tell you, we do not want to rip anything or anyone, but they give us reason to time and time and time again. And, you know, it's no different with Eric Adams.
Yep. So I guess also tonight we'll have the 10-4 Tavern, right? 7 p.m.
Yeah, 7 o'clock. Be sure to tune in with Pete Forcelli and Tom Joyce. They have a very exciting guest as well. It's going to be a fantastic show. The second edition of the 10-4 Tavern. So make sure to get a drink and belly up to the bar with the guys.
That's right. And then tomorrow, of course, 8:05, Finest Unfiltered with John and Eric. And of course, Executive Perspective will be on at 5:05, 17:05 with Rob and Ron. And I hope if anyone in the comments goes on their comments, ask them about the 4th of July, because they were two executives. I didn't mention it today, but Jessica Tish said that there was no shooting July 4th. It clearly was. And Rob and Ron could tell you stories. They were both commanding officers at numerous different stages. And there's never been a 4th of July where there's no incident. So just want to put that out there. So before I go, and thank you all for the comments. You guys have been great today in the comments. Owen Schroyer put this out. Another guy, going to have him back on the show. And he just said this. He said, "We are watching people on X cover up for Jeffrey Epstein in real time. This has to be one of the most disgusting, despicable things I've ever seen. Selling out for politics is one thing. Selling out for pedophiles is another. Inexcusable, unacceptable, unforgivable." That, in a nutshell, tells you what's going on with the world surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. So I hope everybody had a fun time here, getting educated about a lot of different things. I made this show very sprucey today. So don't forget to check out the schedule. 10-4 Tavern tonight. Tomorrow, Finest Unfiltered. In the morning at 5 o'clock, Executive Perspective. And I'll be back on Thursday with Serena Townsend, who will go into full details over the latest bombshell lawsuit against the disgraced mayor of New York City. So until then, I'm going to be signing off right here. And right after this, we'll have the esteemed words from that disgraced mayor that we loved hearing at the end of every show. So I'm signing off here from South Florida, which is a sunny place for shady people.
So this is a biblical moment. You know, when Jesus was on the cross, he said, God, forgive them, for they know not what they do. All these Negroes who are asking me to step down, God, forgive them. Are you stupid?